What's going on, my creative collective? Welcome to lesson number 36 for A Course in Creativity. This is the thin layer of thick reality based on and inspired by A Course in Miracles workbook lesson of the same number, which is My Holiness Envelops Everything I See. Now, just wanting to put this out there as a question to invite some reflection, but what does that leave out? Who does that leave out? Does it leave anything out? Just a question, just some thinking this through, right? Thinking with this thick reality that we have the option to dive into here. Now, I think of thick reality in terms of its sort of counterpart term, thick description, which is diving deep into the descriptors of subject or object, what have you. But this thick reality, the thickness of that, and the depth of that. If your holiness is at the core of it and your connection to spirit is at the core of it, who does that leave out? Who does that leave out for you? Right? How can it leave anything out? And if it doesn't leave anything out, then how is this core to your creative power, right? How does this connect to your creative power? Lots of questions we're starting with today. Let's flip to fear. What happens when fear is everything that you see? What happens when fear is what you see? That's a projection too, right? We can look at the more positive projection, as it were, where our holiness shines out to the world around us. But what about fear? What happens when fear is there, right? Well, things look threatening. Sometimes we look for danger. That's, we have a very fine-tuned and refined system of sensing this. So sometimes we'll look out into the world and look for the danger instead of the possibilities of good, because that's where our vibration has been trained to rest and sit, right? That's where we are training ourselves too, through our thoughts that we think, right? And this isn't to exclusively, uphold thoughts as the way through, because I think emotions are the product of our thoughts. Usually they are the product of things that we think all the time. What you think about, you bring about, and not because there's some way that we're magnetizing bad to us, nothing like that. Because I know sometimes folks ask questions about, well, what about things that are outside of your control? Well, those you get to make meaning of. That's the way I look at this, right? That's where even if something crosses my path that is not in, that is not in a higher vibe place, I get to make meaning from that. I get to choose where my power is. I get to choose how I am going to make something of that, and turn it into something that can become a powerful moment for me, that can become a superpower for me, that can become something more for me. And in the same way that we can ask, what does holiness leave out? We can also look to fear and say, well, what does fear leave out? If we see the world through fear, and your fear envelops everything you see, right? Then that too will become a dominant way that you operate in the world. And beyond anything law of attraction related, just the energetics of it is that you will only look for what you're expecting. Your mind won't be looking for the good. Your mind won't be looking for the silver lining. Your mind won't be looking for that. And your heart will follow suit. Your emotions will follow suit. Your emotions will follow that turn. They will follow that around, right? So it is important to understand that when we see things and our perspective, when we shift our perspective and we see that, the world outside of us takes on a specific character and flavor too. Your holiness seasons the things around you, and that changes the way that you can digest them too. It changes the way that certain things become palpable and not so much. That kind of seasoning is what your holiness does. It sprinkles it all over. But again, we go back to, what does that leave out? What does this light that comes from within you leave out? Whom does it leave out? I've said it in other videos too, and this isn't about just, focusing on peace when it's convenient or when it feels good either. This is about focusing on peace because it's part of who you are, and you recognize that and you're awake to it, right? Sometimes we go through periods where we wake up to it and then we might, fall asleep to it because there are lessons that we're learning in that period, right? But then we wake up to it again and then it comes back. So it's like this ebb and this flow. And I think it's also about having peace for and compassion with ourselves in the process as we tangle with these things too. When we project out into the world, we see the light outside of us. We see that light shining in other people. The shadows cast by that light are not necessarily the shadows of other people, but our own, because we really only react to the shadows that are in us that we see in other people that we're trying to push away. We only really react to those things because those are in us, and we're trying to say, nope, that's not the truth. Nope. So you push it away. We can call it out in others, and we can do all these things in others, but I think it bears some important reflection to see that the shadows that we see in other people are really only possible because of our perspective, right? You won't react to something that you're not. I think about it in terms of allergies, right? You don't react to things you're not allergic to. Triggers are much the same with our shadows and whatnot too. So we don't react to something that isn't within us somewhere, somehow. And this is the work of a lifetime, is undoing this. Healing never finishes. It's never done, right? It's never complete. The shadows that we see are an invitation within, so that we can wipe off the glass that the light is trying to shine through, that got covered at some point with beliefs that we hold about ourselves, relationships that we have that we haven't let go of. And that's not necessarily just romantic. That can be friendships, family relationships, you name it, right? That we have not let go of yet. So we hang on to them and grip them, and then it covers this glass. It covers the glass so we can't really see clearly. And when we can't see other people clearly, it's because we also can't see ourselves clearly too. There's a Rumi quote that says something to the effect of, our job is not to seek for love, but to find all the places that we've built up against it within us, and to address those things. And I think this lesson really speaks to that too. It speaks to that because when we look out into the world, and if we see all of our holiness, then what we're also seeing reflected back is how deserving we are, and how loved we are, and how worthy we are, and how all of these things we are, as opposed to are not, right? Whereas the world can sometimes teach us that we're umpteen and a half have nots or are nots, right? When we are more than we are not. Something else I find really helpful to view this lesson through the lens of is seeing your holiness as a projection, but then also connected to how you experience the world around you. So how does the projection of holiness align with my expectations of what I will see in the world, not just of myself, but of situations where I experience myself as ego? That's kind of how we see where, we begin to see how our projections can be connected to our expectations. Because if we expect to see the light from within ourselves, and if we first expect to see light in ourselves, period, if we first expect to see it, period, then what we'll see out in the world is more of that. And then we also can bump up against where we see also how we've used these projections of light or shadow to justify how we approach the world, how we approach ourselves. We've also used it to justify separation from one another and from spirit, right? To believe that you're separate means that you have to do all this work, to do all these, all of this work to connect. And it justifies this lack of worth. It justifies punishment. It justifies defense. It justifies war. So your creative spark for today is just to consider the possibility, and meditate on it, that there is a holiness that doesn't just exist in you, but that exists in the whole world around you by proxy of you containing it, because that's your sight outward, right? That's your sight outward. So what this is also doing is getting you to entertain the possibility, just again, considering the possibility, just entertain it, that what is outside of you that you fear the most cannot really touch you. It cannot really harm you, because reality is it's neutral. Our perspective is the thing that can charge it. And I say that even having experienced things like violence, even having experienced things as a trans person, reality itself is neutral. I get to choose what I make of it, right? I get to choose that. Can I have emotional reactions that need to be addressed? Absolutely. That's what compassion's for, right? I firmly believe we are human, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, but we need to honor the human experience, which comes with the depth of emotion that we need to connect to, because it anchors us not just in a reality here, but what it does is it connects us to other people, because we are as human as those around us. So there's a deep and a thick humanity, as it were, that we're connecting to as well, which is also part of a spiritual experience. We can't deny this part of ourselves. To do that is to dishonor yourself, because then it means that all of these accoutrements of humanness, you're going to push away. But for what? Because they're so deeply a part of you. And that too is sacred. Your humanness is sacred. Your humanness is also holy. This is your lesson for today. If this resonated at all, please like and subscribe. I'd love to have you on the channel if you are not already. But I'm very also just grateful for your time and your energy here. So thank you so much for that. There are other ways you can connect with me on the channel, so check that out. But if this is where we leave things, I hope that wherever this finds you on the time and space continuum, morning, afternoon, or night, it finds you very, very well, my friends. Take care.